one of the most practical tips that I feel like I wish that more people would have known graduating college is to keep your lifestyle low and to get your debts paid off. So what happens is you're in undergrad and you got this big refund check. We all did. We all had most of them, unless you were fortunate enough not to have any student loan debt. And then you kind of got accustomed to being able to live a lifestyle in college that maybe even would be beyond your means as you initially graduate. So what happens is I notice a lot of people, they graduate, they get the big car, they get the apartment with the high rise, and they start to acquire all this, what I like to call lifestyle, before they've assessed their financial priorities, right? And so now you're in a tough spot where maybe you're not making quite what you thought you'd be making post undergrad, but now you're in a situation where you start to spend more money and you're using credit or debt to leverage or bridge the gap between the lifestyle you have and the lifestyle you want. And that pretty much becomes a downward spiral from there. And what it might require is, if you've already kind of gone down that road, to humble yourself, right? Maybe you're, late 20s, early 30s, and you're like, I'm not getting a roommate, or I'm not trading in my car for something that's a little more modest. But the reality is, when the first of the month comes and those bills are due, your social media friends, Instagram, Facebook, none of those people are going to send you a check saying, hey, look, we really like that BMW you posted, so we're going to send you some money to keep posting it every month, right? That's just not going to happen. We wish it did, but it's not going to happen. So you got to live a lifestyle that is going to provide you peace of mind and not give the appearance of success that may or may not even be there yet, right? So the takeaway from that piece of the conversation is just to don't live beyond your means, right? We've heard it before, but a lot of times we get caught up in what our friends are doing, what our family's doing, or where we feel like we should be, and we make decisions based upon that, not where we actually are, right? So that's kind of the first takeaway. The next thing I want to talk about is the power of starting small and starting early. So a lot of times, aside from the debt that we may be carrying or servicing, we're also not taking into consideration planning for our future, right? We're always putting it off as, well, I have time to do that. I just got out of school. Okay, well, you've been out of school for a few years, but okay, well, I got to finally start paying my student loans back. Okay, well, you can keep pushing the ball down the road or kicking the can down the road, but the reality is compound interest can be your best friend or your worst enemy. So to put that into context, if you were to invest $350 a month as soon as you graduated, and I'll pause right there because a lot of people might think, well, how could I invest $350 a month as soon as I graduate? Well, if you kind of assess your lifestyle and started to prioritize what was important, maybe you can move some things around and make sure that your long-term planning is at the top of the priority list and not the car payment, right? But back to my point, if you were to invest $350 a month, let's say at age 22, by the time you retire, you'd have over $1 million at retirement by virtue of compound interest. So a lot of times you hear a big number like $1 million and you're like, man, that's not me. I'll never have it. It's unattainable. But the reality is you just have to know the numbers and you have to start small. Now, obviously, past performance of investments can't indicate future performance, but by and large, compound interest at around 7% over the long haul from the time you graduate until retirement, you can accumulate just over $1 million. On the flip side of that, what happens if you wait till 30? If you invest the same amount starting at 30, how much do you think you'd have? Well, unfortunately, you'd only have right around $600,000, right? So you're losing $400,000 of potential retirement savings simply because you decided to wait 8 years to start, right? So you've got to make planning for the long term your future. And it all ties together because financial planning is a puzzle. So if you're keeping your lifestyle low, getting your debt down, and then being able to free up cash flow to do things like invest, then it doesn't seem like such a daunting task. Because if you wait till 30 in order to still have $1 million saved up, you'd have to invest twice as much money, roughly probably I think $628 to have roughly around the same amount that you would if you invested $350 at age 22. So it's so important to keep your priorities in mind. Don't get caught up. I mean, people are traveling, they're having a good time, And quite frankly, I like to do all those things. And I never tell my clients not to enjoy life. But you just got to make sure that the things that you're doing are in the right category or the right rank on the priority list. Because if you're going on a trip to Europe, it's going to cost you $3,000, but you don't have $3,000 in your savings account, something's not adding up, right? You just got to take that honest inventory and say, hey, hey fellas, or hey ladies, can't make this trip, but I definitely will try to make it next year. And anybody that really cares about you can understand that putting your financial priorities at the forefront is something that they can't be mad at you for not attending. On a more practical level, even before investing, it's kind of important to know how to kind of organize your money. And I like to kind of break it down into 3 categories. You have the stretch zone, which is the area you want to be. That's kind of the place where it's not going to be easy, but if I take control and prioritize my spending, I can make it happen. You have the comfort zone, and that's something that anybody can do. That's like saving $20 a month. And then you have the chill zone, and that's kind of, where you would like to be if everything was perfect, but 9 times out of 10, things never happen exactly as we planned. So we got to kind of put a buffer in there to make sure. So you kind of want to live in that stretch zone. That's the area where if you kind of sit down and look at your finances, all right, this is a reasonable amount of money I can put aside to invest for the future. This is a reasonable amount of money I can put aside to pay down my debt. And as long as I stay committed to the plan, it's plausible. You kind of want to stay away from the comfort zone because that's not going to accelerate your progress and kind of get you where you want to be financially. So you got to really stretch yourself, but at the same token, not put yourself in a space where it's unrealistic to achieve that. The way I kind of break that down in to kind of keep everything organized is I have my accounts broken into different segments. And this might be something that you guys can do going forward in order to kind of keep your cash flow organized. So one thing that I do is I have an emergency fund. And an emergency fund is if you're employed, if the employer says, hey, Crystal, you've been great to us, but kind of going in a different direction. Knock on wood, we know that's not going to happen. You're an alumni and probably a great employee. So, but just hypothetically, they say, hey, look, we got to go in a different direction. The budget's not there anymore. If anything changes, we'll let you know. What are you going to do, right? If you're 100% relying on that paycheck, the moment you get laid off, what are you going to do? And I have friends that have gotten laid off. I'm an entrepreneur, so I know what it's like to have ups and downs in business. So you want to have an account where, yeah, you might not be able to put $1,000 in there every month, but you're starting small and putting something away in there every month and never touching it for the what if my job decides they no longer need me, right? And that'll give you the peace of mind for 3 or hopefully even 6 months to be able to look for that job and not feel like you have to rob Peter to pay Paul in the process, right? Another account that I like to have to organize my money is emergency reserves, right? So these are for all the expenses that we know they're going to happen. We don't know what they are going to be. We don't know how much they're going to cost, but they're coming, right? And it could even also be for non-revolving expenses. Like we might forget that our vehicle taxes are due at a certain time every year. But it's not a monthly expense, but it happens once a year. We might forget about the flat tire. We might forget about the car maintenance. And I even like to set aside money for, I'm at a stage in life where people are getting married and engaged and all that kind of stuff. So set aside money for those gifts or things of that nature, right? Because the biggest pushback I always get when it comes to saving money is people always say, well, I can't save money because something always comes up. Well, you just answered your own question. If something always comes up, why don't you always plan for it? Now, we don't necessarily know what the expense is going to be associated with what comes up, but as long as we're putting something away, that'll at least give us a buffer versus having to use, undue amount of our paycheck to cover that emergency expense, right? The other way, I think, and this is probably the most practical and the most important of them all, is it's like a 21st century version of the envelope system. I'm not sure if anybody's ever heard of that, but the envelope system is you take the money out your bank account, you write what the expense is on the envelope, whether it's groceries, gas, whatever, and you set that money aside so that you don't spend more than that. Well, it's 2016. I don't know about you, but I'm not walking around with a bunch of envelopes. So what I do is I actually have an account called variable expenses. And what I do is I look at my budget and I say, okay, cool. I should only be spending about $240 on gas this month. Well, probably more than that this month. They're running out of gas. But So that, then I got my groceries, I got my food, I got everything that could fluctuate. Not my bills. My bills are going to stay the same with the exception of your light bill going up and down a little bit. But I put aside that money in that account so that I only have the money I need for those expenses. Why? Because they vary. So if they vary and I have all my money combined in one place, I'm going to just keep swiping and keep swiping and keep swiping. And then before you know it, at the end of the month, it'll be like when we were back in college and the grades came out. You know, you log in and you kind of don't, to your online banking, you kind of don't want to look at it because you don't know the damage. You kind of scrolling down and hoping it's not too bad. You don't want that to be you, right? So segregating your money in different accounts really helps keep things organized and really helps put it in perspective how much you really have, because it's easy to feel like you have more to spend when everything you have is in one account, right? So that's kind of one of the mantras I live by, and anybody that knows me knows I do it. If my wife was here right now, she'd be shaking her head saying, yeah, don't do it. But the reality is it helps. It helps a lot, and it will keep your spending in line and make sure that you stay on track. I did want to throw out there a couple of resources that might help in this process. Mint.com is a free site, and basically it's great for budgeting and tracking. So what you can do is you can go in there and set thresholds and say, hey, look, just like I explained, I only want to spend X amount of dollars on this expense for all your various expenses. And you can set up alerts to where it'll send you notifications when you've gotten close to spending that amount, which is, you know, a pretty valuable tool. Also, you might say, well, I don't know if I'm ready to work with a financial advisor yet. I don't know about the world of investing. It's also overwhelming to me. Fortunately, there's a lot of sites out there now that kind of make that process very simple. One of the platforms that I actually use and recommend for my clients is Betterment.com. And what Betterment does is you can go online, kind of put your investment objectives or goals are, and what they'll do is they will show you a way to create a portfolio that's suited for where you are and where you want to go. And you can set it up directly with your checking account. And there again, like I said, you can start small. You don't have to have $100,000. You don't even have to have $1,000. You can start very small and just set it up automatically so that it continues to come out. Because a lot of times half the battle is we just don't know where to go. We don't know what to do. So if you can have kind of a platform that helps aid in that process, it'll eliminate some of the legwork. Those are some of the key points I wanted to touch on. Definitely will be open to questions towards the end of this. If you guys have anything else you want to bring up or address or ask me, feel free. But other than that, if Crystal, if you want to pass it to Dave, you can certainly do that.
Sure. One question, just so that I can make sure we capture this accurately and share it after the session. You said Betterment.com. Is that?
Yeah, so the word better and then MENT.
Okay, gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So thank you, George. We're going to turn it over now to Dave Landers, and Dave is going to talk to us a little bit about planned giving and how you can build that into your financial goals. It could be that you want to, you have a organization or an affinity for your school, and you want to be able to give back, and you want to be able to do that in the future and make a bigger impact versus being able to do it right now. So Dave, we're going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Crystal. As Crystal introduced me, my name is David Landers, and I'm the Director of Planned Giving here at UNCG. In essence, I'm a fundraiser, and as a follow-on to the way George was describing this, my element of fundraising falls into this area of discretionary income beyond the priorities that George established. And I think we all agree that the debt management and expense management and the savings that George was identifying are the absolute priorities in any household and in any individual budget. The area of fundraising, of course, comes into that portion of your discretionary income that you have and that you set aside for everything from entertainment to fundraising or charitable gifts to organizations that you choose to support, whether it be the university or the American Red Cross or your church or any other charitable organization like that. So we're all familiar with the different types of fundraising efforts that are launched on behalf of an organization, whether those may be by the university or by other entities. For example, I'm sure all of us have experienced or received phone calls from the phone-a-thon at the annual fund at UNCG, where the students are calling us, asking us to make a small gift or an ongoing gift on a monthly basis to the universities to support various university projects. Some of us may have also received contact and solicitations from the university for larger gifts. These are larger cash gifts that may be $10,000 or more that fall into that category of what are called major gifts. Plan giving that I'm responsible for kind of covers everything else in a broad range of asset types as well as different types of gift vehicles. For example, the largest and most common type of plan gift that we see are where people leave a gift to the university in their wills through a will bequest, naming us as a beneficiary of a retirement account, something like that. These are the most common plan gifts, and they actually constitute about 80% of all plan gifts around the country, including for the university. One of the attractive features of plan gifts that I like to talk with donors about is that these types of gifts can be made without even having to write a check to the university. That's kind of my immediate response. I know when I get phone calls from my alma mater about making gifts to the university, my first thought is, what's in my checking account, what's in my monthly budget, what can my monthly budget or income stream afford in terms of making a gift to the university or to an organization. Plan gifts kind of encompass everything but that chunk of that particular household asset. They can be a beneficiary designation of a retirement account, as George was talking about, starting savings accounts and retirement accounts for employers and things like that. In addition to naming family members as beneficiaries of those types of accounts, which we strongly encourage and I've done as well, you can also, though, name a charitable organization as a beneficiary of that account. For example, leaving 5% of your retirement account to a church or to a university, something along those lines. And those are typically the most common types of plan gifts that we receive. To kind of parallel what George was talking about, though, in terms of financial planning, one of the things about these types of gifts to a charitable organization that's attractive to individuals is the fact that you get a tax benefit for those. You get to mark that box on your tax returns each year where you've made charitable gifts to organizations, and you get a tax deduction for the amount of charitable gifts that you've made the preceding year, regardless of that amount, whether it's small or large. So whether it's $10 a month that you've chosen to give to the university or to your church, whether it's a significantly larger gift, you do get a tax benefit. And then, as George can probably describe in a little bit more detail, depending on the nature of your circumstances and on your specific financial scenario that you're involved in, the tax benefit can be very valuable as you're looking at financial planning for the year and maximizing tax deductions in addition to such things as mortgage deductions and some other things. So that's one of the immediate benefits to a donor in terms of a charitable gift. And of course, obviously, there's an immediate benefit to the university or to your church or other organization when you make a charitable gift. One of the things that can be done here at the university when you make a gift like that is to designate the purpose that you'd like that gift to support. For example, if when going to school here, you were the beneficiary of a specific scholarship fund or a program that you were very involved in while here on campus, you can contribute to that same scholarship fund once you're out. You can make an ongoing monthly contribution, whether it's $10 a month or significantly higher, to support future students who are going through the same program and receiving the same type of scholarship that you did. One of the things I would like to keep in mind in deference to George's comments is that these types of gifts, any type of charitable gift, as well as plan giving, and we can talk about this in a bit more detail as the program goes on, I realized that early on in professional careers, these do fall in the luxury categories and are within that discretionary spending category. It was that way for me when I got out of school. I remember thinking when I got calls from people asking me to contribute to organizations, there's no way I have the money for this. I've got to have these priorities over here for my household and these priorities for savings and things like that. and it's still true to a certain extent now. But I think what the principles that George is talking about in terms of you're concentrating on your expenditures, concentrating on keeping the debt to zero or eliminating debt, and then establishing a hierarchy of priorities after that, you'll find that there is room, even on a very minimal level, to make ongoing gifts to the charitable organizations that you choose to support. Again, whether that may be your church, may be the United Way or university or an organization like that. So, and we can certainly explore that in more detail as we kind of go on through the program.
Thank you so much for that, Dave. So I have a couple of questions just based off of some of the things both of you have already highlighted previously. And so I want to start with you, George. When we're talking about savings and, getting that first job, a lot of people are faced with a lot of options that they either don't know what they mean or how it could financially impact them. For example, a 401k or 403b, like your retirement option, or a dependent care reimbursement or flexible spending account. Can you talk to us a little bit about the importance and kind of how you evaluate, whether you're going to contribute to those types of accounts, why you should contribute to some of those types of accounts?
Sure. Okay. For a couple reasons, in most cases, you should. So the naming of them, 401k, 403b, things of that nature, those are pretty much just IRS tax codes, right? That's the way the IRS classifies the type of account. So for 401k, if you are working out in the world at a big corporation, medium-sized corporation, that's probably what you're going to be offered. If you're working in education or something of that sort, or working for the state, you're more likely going to be offered a 403b. Now, based upon the way they're taxed, they're pretty much treated the same. So the contributions that you make to those accounts go in on a tax-deferred basis. They grow on a tax-deferred basis. And then when you actually need to use the funds or access them at retirement, then they're taxed as ordinary income. So the key with that is you got to ask yourself a few questions, right? Do I think that tax rates are going to go up in the future? Well, if I was a betting man, I'd say that they would go up in the future. So I kind of like to tell my clients, let's position some of your money in 401k, and let's also look at some other options, which I'll touch on here briefly. Because when you're at retirement, you're going to be on a fixed income, right? Meaning there's no more paycheck coming in. You might get some Social Security, but beyond that, what you've accumulated is what you're going to have to base your lifestyle off of. So you want to make sure that that's taking as minimal as a hit as possible, right? So obviously taxes being a large hit, you want to take that into consideration. Now they offer plans like what you would call Roth 401ks. And what those are is the money is going to be taxed on the front end. It's going to grow tax deferred, and then when you want to use it at retirement, it's not going to be taxed. So the beauty of that is you don't have to worry about any more taxes once you've already paid the tax on them. So some of the key factors that you're going to want to consider when contributing is, does my employer match, right? And if they match, you definitely want to contribute at least up until the point, if you can, and if it's within your means, to contribute up until the point that the employer matches, because essentially they're going to match either dollar for dollar or have some kind of equation that equates what they're willing to match based upon your contribution. And that's free money, and we all like free money, right? So you don't want to give that up. And that was kind of a three-part question. So did I touch on all of the points?
The other part of that was around like flexible spending accounts and dependent care reimbursement.
Okay. I don't have a lot of knowledge on the dependent care reimbursement piece of it, but as far as flexible spending accounts, those typically make sense as well. And typically your employer either is going to offer a plan where you can opt into the flexible spending account or not, depending upon your preference. And those are treated somewhat similar in the sense that the money that you contribute, as long as they're for qualified medical expenses, are treated on a tax favorable basis, right? So that's another way for you to kind of avoid some taxes, which will inherently increase your tax liability which inherently increases the amount of money that's coming to you after taxes come out. So those are all small things to factor in. It may not seem like a lot, but when you factor in leveraging what you're doing with your 401k, and you factor in what you can do with the FHA, and then also what Dave was talking about with plan giving, those are all ways to decrease your tax liability, which essentially means either one, more money is coming back to you, or you're able to contribute to things you love, whether it be the institution that you went to or your church, and give that money to them instead of giving it to the IRS, which I'm in favor for all day of the week, every day of the week. So.
Awesome, thank you. And so this question is for you, Dave. You mentioned being able to give, with plan giving, that's something that's done in the future. Do all people need a will? And if so, if you work out a planned gift with a university or another organization, does that have to be included in your will?
All people, I mean, you don't need a will, but I strongly recommend a will for everybody. Particularly as you start out early, that was one of the last things that I was considering, even as an attorney when I was practicing law out of law school. I kept thinking I don't need a will yet. And it took me several years to actually have one written and created for my family. The thing about a will, though, is that we tend to think that it's not something that's needed for years and years and years. We also need to, when we think about writing a will, it kind of confronts us with our own mortality, and that's one of the psychological obstacles I think a lot of people have to writing a will. The reason a will is so important, though, is that it controls what happens with your household and your life when those end-of-life decisions come about. Will is not just for disposal of your property when you pass away. A will also controls, for example, the appointment of guardians for your children. That's not something that needs to take place when you're 60 years old. Those are the kinds of considerations that we need to be thinking about in our 20s as we're starting families. Will also controls for the disposition of property going to a spouse or partner. And again, that's not something that we need to be thinking about as we're approaching retirement age. Those are things we need to think about as we're entering into familial relationships in our 20s and 30s. So I strongly recommend a will for everybody. The other things that accompany will, and this is just accompany a will, and this is just in terms of general estate planning, is that a will can also provide for end-of-life decisions. For example, in terms of healthcare emergencies or things like that, we tend to think that we're going to live forever, that those types of issues are years and years down the road. But the reality is that we see those around us every day. We see parents and family members who have not made those decisions, and as children, we're faced with making those on their behalf, trying to discern what their motivations and wishes would be in circumstances where they can no longer exercise those options. The same things for siblings or for nieces and nephews. So the will, along with advanced care directives, as I'm sure George is familiar with in counseling a lot of his clients about estate planning and things like that, gives some direction for our family members in terms of not just property disposition, but decisions within the family, guardianships, end-of-life decisions, things like that. When it comes to making a will, you can certainly provide for a charitable gift within your will. You can do that in a number of ways. You can say, I'd like to leave a specific amount of money in my will to a specific charitable organization. If there's a particular piece of property that's, and not just real property, I mean personal property that is valuable to you. For example, a piece of artwork that you might have purchased or inherited, even the silver collection that was handed down to you from your grandmother. Those can all be given to charities in the forms of testamentary gifts through a will, of which the charity might have tremendous use for, depending on the nature of the charity. And again, the will can also be a vehicle for somebody to leave a gift to the university just in terms of general assets of the estate. The most common type of testamentary gift that we get through a will is a gift to the university from an alum where they say, I leave 5% or 10% of the estate to the university. Whatever my estate may be on the day that I die, that percentage goes to the university or to a charitable organization. That allows somebody to make a gift without having to write a check. that allows them to make a gift without having to worry about what the estate's going to be on the day that they pass away, whenever that is. It also allows them to make a gift to the estate without encumbering any existing assets for anything from that event tomorrow and life event that we may not be planning for, to healthcare needs that may come up in years down the road. That doesn't change any of those needs that we have now and gives us the flexibility to always change our minds later on. Now, having said that, you can make a testamentary gift to the university or to a charitable organization. It doesn't have to be made through a will. There are a number of ways to do that. You can do that through a trust, which is a more complex way of making a planned gift. You can do it through a gift of retirement benefits. Again, say designating 5 or 10% of your retirement account that George was talking about, that 401k, to the university or another charitable organization. So there are lots of ways to leave those beneficiary designations and end-of-life gifts like that.
Thank you for that. Now, shifting gears again, back to you, George. A big conversation that a lot of young adults have is whether or not they should consolidate their student loans. Do you have any experience, and what would be your advice there?
Consolidating your student loans. There's a few factors that I guess you want to take into consideration, if it makes sense. And honestly, the biggest factor for me personally, because I think that there's a big psychology of money more so than anything. I think a lot of your spending habits and what you do is based upon your philosophies, and then from there your habits and so on and so forth. So for me and certain people, consolidating your loans, quite frankly, might just make it easier, right? You might have loans, that you got from the state. You might have some private loans, and you might, over the course of 4 years, or even if you did graduate school, you might have a lot of different accounts out there. It might be hard to keep up with, right? So if ease of payment is a concern, consolidating your loans could help with that. Other factors to consider when consolidating your loans naturally would be varying interest rates, right? So if you have, an interest rate that's maybe 6 or 8%, and then maybe you had to get a private loan and the interest rate is much higher, and you got interest rates that are all over the place, you can do the math, and it might make sense to consolidate if there's a company out there that's willing to offer you a lower rate, right? Which means that you'd inherently pay less interest over time. So those are, I would say, probably two of the overarching and glaringly evident factors that you want to consider when it comes to thinking about consolidating your loans. One of the other things is something that I didn't realize until probably here recently, a few years ago. When it comes to your student loans, for the most part, they will show up on your credit report individually, right? So if you got a loan freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, whatever the case may be, and sometimes even maybe by semester, they'll show up individually. So whereas in your mind, let's just say, you're in your early 20s, you maybe aren't making the best decisions or aren't making the most money, and you just say, I'm going to ignore student loans right now. And maybe you don't even go through the process of putting them in deferment. You just say, people have done it, it's okay. I don't have the money for it right now, so there's no need in me even addressing it, right? What happens, though, is you might think you're just ignoring one payment, but you're going to get a different hit for every student loan on that account. And it can make your credit look worse than it really is, right? Because you're thinking, well, why do I have so many negative marks on my credit? Well, the reality is because the way the credit bureaus are looking at it is those are all individual accounts. So if you figure you had just 2 loans a year times, 4 years of college, that's 8 different loans on your report, right? Not to mention any private loans you might got or anything in between. And that could be very detrimental to your score if, life happened and you couldn't afford to pay or whatever the case may be. So another point of that you might want to think about is if and when, because life can happen, something happens where I can't pay my credit, my student loan, or whatever the case may be, it'll look a lot better if you have one account that's delinquent than if you have 8 to 10, right? Now, that's not a free pass to say don't pay your student loans. That's a very practical reality that, some of us, I know me personally, I'm speaking from experience. When I was in my early 20s, I had an internship with Coca-Cola, was slated to climb the management track, didn't happen. I graduated in 2009 just after, the market crashed. So a lot of positions were gone. So last thing I was worried about was student loans, and then I ended up, finding a passion in the financial sector, and I was like, oh gosh, I wish I would have known that 2 years ago. And I realized how much of an impact that can have. But so for me, that's a personal experience and testimony. Consolidating your loans, for me, it could have been the difference of having 8 accounts that were delinquent or just one. So that's another factor to consider. But by and large, I'd say the main factors are if it's easy, right, just having one payment, because you might forget that you got this loan and they might have a wrong address and they're sending paperwork to an old address and you're not even trying to be delinquent, but you might have forgotten about it. And then the other factor, obviously, is interest rates and making sure that you're paying the least amount possible when it comes to repaying your loans. So.
Thank you for that. And so another question for you, Dave. What is your advice or best practices for young alumni who want to give, especially who are beginning their career? And you alluded a little bit to this when you talked about annual giving or, when people receive calls from the telefund. Do you want to share a response to that question?
Sure. I think the easiest way to give when you're young and you're just starting out, and this doesn't mean that necessarily that first year after graduation. I think it applies to that first decade after graduation as you're getting yourself established, as you're looking for a new job, as you're establishing a household, whether it be by yourself or with others. I think the easiest way is to take advantage of that annual fund that you described. Every organization has an annual fund of some type, whether it be the Sierra Club, whether it be the United Way, the university. They all have annual funds where you can contribute on a monthly basis or on an annual basis. And the easiest thing to do is just go in there and just start with a small gift, just get in the habit of giving. Start with a small gift of $5 or $10 a month. You will never see it disappear out of your budget. You can set it up so that it's automatic to come out of your account. And it's just one of those things. It's just you can establish it as one of your regular, ongoing, important expenses that establishes a habit of charitable support, which of course the organization will appreciate. But as you look at starting a family, look at your children and teaching them these same types of lessons, it's something that you can point to and say, look, it's not a lot. I'm not giving $1,000 a month. I'm not writing a $25,000 check this year to the organization. But this is our way to best support the causes in which we believe. And as I'm sure you're familiar with, and many other people are, that the annual fund in any organization with charities across the country are the primary source of regular income every year, month in, month out, year in, year out, to support their ongoing operations. That $5 a month sounds very small, but when you combine it with 100 other people, 1,000, 10,000 people who support that organization, suddenly you've got this extraordinary income stream that's going to that organization, and you're a tremendous block of philanthropic support on which that organization can rely. So in terms of recommendations to people who are relatively young, who are in that first decade coming out of school, that would certainly be my strongest recommendation for establishing that practice of giving, that practice of philanthropic support. The plain gifts that we've talked about, which my office concentrates on, many times just come in the second and third decades after you've been out working in the workforce and becoming more established. But I think that annual fund is certainly the most important place to start in making that commitment to supporting an organization on a regular basis.
Thank you. And just from my experience and just thinking, my family, we live by a budget. We apply a lot of the same principles that George has mentioned, but $5 a month, $10 a month, that's a couple trips to Starbucks. And if you have those types of things built already into your budget, where you have that flexible option, then you can definitely miss a couple of trips to Starbucks or brew your own coffee at home, if you will. But it's definitely ways to weave in that charitable giving, regardless of what stage you're in, if you're willing to maybe make some sacrifices in other areas.
Indeed.
So thank you for that. doesn't look like we have any other questions today, but I do want to share contact information for both Dave and George. If anyone has the need for financial planning or advice service, please reach out to George. His information is listed. He, as we mentioned, is the founder of MakesSenseToMe.com, which I've had an opportunity to check out the website. It's full of great resources, free resources at that. George is very knowledgeable. We thank you again for sharing your time today and experience. If you are interested in learning more about plan giving, feel free to reach out to Dave. His information is also listed. Again, thanks to everyone for tuning in today. We appreciate it. Thanks, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks for the invitation. I appreciate the time.
Have a good one.
Bye.